What's up everyone, Vu of Envu Films back with another video, and today this is a follow-up video of my previous video about the new Sigma 28-45 f1.8 zoom lens for Sony E-mount. Obviously, some of you L-mount Panasonic D-bags also have the opportunity to use this lens, and this review might be relatable to you as well. This past weekend, I filmed 2 weddings, and this is the exact setup that I used to film those 2 weddings. My Sony FX3, the Sigma 28-45 f1.8 lens, and of course my Freewell 1/8 mist filter right here. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you some of the footage.
Camden, I love you. I vow to pray for you and with you. I vow to be your helper so you can do all that God calls you to.
Lydia, you are a gift from God. I want to be a great man for you because you deserve only the best for your future family. Someone like you who showcases God's grace for others, kindness towards the undeserved, charity, unconditional love, mercy, the way you constantly do.
Now that we're back and you got to see the footage, what did I think about it? Obviously, this lens has great image quality. The autofocus handled as well as any Sony branded lens I've ever used. So I have no complaints there. And again, I apologize for my daughter back there making a bunch of noises because it is summer vacation and I am trying to be a YouTube D-bag trash on camera as well as watch my children at the same time. So there's that. So image quality was great, autofocus great, performance, whatever you want to call it. I have no complaints about this lens. Even the zoom range was good enough for me. Do I wish I could get a 24mm instead of a 28? Of course, but 28mm served me well. It did the job. Did I wish at times I had a 70mm or even longer? Of course, but those instances are very few and far between, and for 99% of the shoot, 45mm was plenty, especially when I was hand holding and I would go into active state, it actually became more of a 50mm. So overall, have no complaints about the lens. Some of you of late has commented that you really like the shot that I'm getting for this talking head. You like the fact that I'm out here in natural light. You get to see all that natural background of my backyard in the shot. And I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but it's not fully natural light. Even though there's windows to my left and pretty much surrounding me here, the light that I'm using in this key light is actually artificial light. And it's just the fact that it's, motivated practical lighting, or whatever you want to call it. It makes it look natural. My previous videos, I was just using a Juin Molis X100, and I just had a sheet covering the, I just had a white sheet covering the window, and I was just reflecting the Molis X100 light at 100% back at me. Today, I have a different setup. I actually have a random Ulanzi 120 watt light sent to me to test out. They didn't even email me to let me know, it just kind of showed up at my door. And they also sent me this quick folding Ulanzi softbox, which takes literally 5 seconds to unfold. And that's what I'm using today. I'm using that softbox and this 120 watt RGB light, obviously with bicolor as well. Currently on 5600 Kelvin at 100% output with the Ulanzi quick softbox. Softbox is called the Ulanzi Fold D580, and it's unfolds as advertised, and it looks really nice. And when it's set up in this situation, the quality of the softbox and the diffusion makes it look like the light is actually just coming from outside the window, but it's not. And as you can see, it's right here, right out of frame. So yeah, just letting you know how I actually light this scene, and it's not completely natural light. Of course, I could use natural light in this scene, but the problem with using natural light, sunlight obviously, is because if clouds go over the sun or what have you, my exposure gets all jacked up, my white balance gets all jacked up. Having a constant artificial light in a natural light environment situation enables you to control your lighting, control your exposure, and control your white balance, because obviously natural light is constantly changing, and, it could wreck your shot, wreck your footage pretty nicely. So yeah, that is how I've been lighting this scene. The main thing I was concerned with this lens was the weight. And I was actually quite anxious before this weekend's weddings because I knew that I was about to go in filming with this lens, knowing that it is almost 2 pounds. And I have been filming previous weeks with a Sony 24 to 50 G lens, which you guys know is super light. I think for most of you filmmakers, wedding filmmakers, corporate filmmakers, whatever filmmakers, run and gun, documentary filmmakers, your main concern about this lens is going to be the weight. Maybe somewhat the focal length in terms of just having 28 to 45 range, but for most of you, it's going to be the weight. And I can tell you that, yes, this lens is hefty. As a handheld rig, I didn't think it was too bad for, to carry around, to hold, to film with. I thought it was fine. Matter of fact, the extra weight helps with image stabilization, as you could just let it rest on your hand. The biggest concern would be on the gimbal. And I had used the Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to 2.8 zoom lens before, and it's only a little bit heavier than this lens here. But that lens felt a lot heavier while using it. And the only thing that I could think of in terms of why was because this lens has an internal zoom, whereas the Tamron had an external zoom. So anytime that I was not using 35 millimeter on that Tamron 35-150, the gimbal felt extra heavy because the weight extends with the zoom, making the overall balance of the rig front heavy. And I'm not talking about balance on the gimbal. I'm talking about overall balance of the rig, as if you putting a lens on your camera, say, it's comparable to, let's say, using an adapted lens to a native lens. When you use an adapter, you add a little piece right here between the camera body and the lens, extending the lens forward. And when you don't have, and when you're using a native lens, obviously the lens is connected directly to the mount. That little adapter creates an imbalance on the rig. That's why I don't like using adapted lenses. And the same thing applies to having the camera and a lens on a gimbal. Because the Tamron externally zooms out, anytime I was away from 35, that rig just felt extra heavy. There's more pressure in the front of the rig. And then what happens? All of that extra weight is transferred directly to my old ass Asian back. With this lens, because of the external zoom, the balance was the same throughout. And so I was able to manage the gimbal by resting it on my thigh throughout the day. And the weight actually didn't affect me the way I thought it would. And overall, I really enjoyed using this lens. And I will continue to use this lens going forward because of the versatility of a 28 to 45 millimeter range. And of course, the f1.8 constant aperture throughout the whole zoom range. I mean, besides from those specs, the lens actually just looks great. I like the way the bokeh swirls around. I like the overall characteristics of this lens. It doesn't look like a typical like clinical zoom like a 24-70 would. It looks different, even though it is sharp throughout from center to corner of the frame. It just looks different. I think it's the colors that the lens produces, as well as the way it renders the background blur. Again, with a lot of cat's eye towards the corners and a like swirly effect in the lens gives it like a more of a vintage type of look versus one of these clinical modern lenses. And of course, I am using my Freewell 1/8 mist. And anytime I felt like the mist was too much, clearly I was just able to take it off. And then when I needed it, I just put it right back on and I had the mist back. That's what I like about these Freewell filters. So that's pretty much my final thoughts on this Sigma 2845 f1.8 DGDN. DN stands for D's Nuts zoom lens for the Sony E-mount and L-mount cameras. And I guess you could use this video and the previous video, both of them together to be like my full review of this lens. But if you are a run and gun filmmaker, wedding filmmaker, and you're looking for usable zoom range for run and gun shooting, handheld or on gimbal, and you are not a weak piece of douchebag trash, then I highly recommend you get the 28-45 f4.8. I think pretty much any run and gun filmmaker out there that just loves using primes and loves the look of an f1.8, f1.4, but sometimes feels stuck on that one focal length when there are other types of shots to be had during that time, but there isn't enough time for you to switch lenses. This lens is highly recommended, and in my opinion, at $1,350, this lens is kind of a bargain. But that's just my opinion. Until next time, lighten up.
Hey man, what lens is that?
This is a Sony 24-50 f2.8 G lens.
Oh my god, that lens, it's trash.
Why is that?
It's f2.8 made in Vietnam, trash. If you want to be the best, if you want to be professional, if you want to be award-winning, you need to use the BBC L.
What are you talking about, BBC?
Let me show you. Oh my god, big black camera lens. Sigma 2845 f1.8.
I don't know if my old ass Asian back's gonna be able to carry around that weight all day.
You go to B&H, they take care of you.
B&H Photo, aren't they closed for Jewish holiday?
No man, B&H Bit and Ho Phở Nail and Massage. Buy phở #1 Lakshai with happy ending massage. Only $29.99.